Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States today has reached the highest level in its history, owing over $38 trillion. The European Union carries around $14 trillion, and Japan nearly $9 trillion. Even oil-rich nations like Saudi Arabia or export powerhouses like Germany and China hold enormous debts. But here lies a paradox. If everyone is in debt, who exactly is owed? Debt is not just a burden. It is the architecture of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every boom and bust sits on top of this invisible scaffold of IOUs. And when you follow the chain of creditors far enough back, you face an unsettling truth. The world doesn't owe money to anyone in particular. The world owes it to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how the global debt pile, now over $315 trillion, nearly 3 times the size of the world economy, came to be, we need to go back to the beginning. Long before credit cards or digital transfers, the idea of national debt was born not on Wall Street, but in war. In 1694, England was at war with France, and its gold reserves were nearly exhausted. The king turned to merchants for help. In exchange for a promise of permanent interest payments backed by future taxes, the merchants provided funds to the crown. To manage this new arrangement, the Bank of England was created. It was revolutionary. The state could now spend money it did not yet have. And in return, creditors gained something extremely valuable: a tradable promise from the government. This was the birth of the government bond and of the modern financial system. France copied it. The Netherlands refined it further. The newly formed United States adopted it to finance both the War of Independence and its westward expansion. National debt stopped being a sign of failure and became a measure of credibility. A nation's ability to borrow became a symbol of its ability to govern. Once, empires conquered land to extract gold. Now they issue bonds to extract interest. The battlefield moved to the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries, and debt has become the world's most important export. The U.S. owes $38 trillion. Japan owes over $9 trillion. And global debt increases by $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country is in debt. Every bank lends. Every citizen, through taxes, savings, and pensions, is both a debtor and a creditor. So who holds the other end of the rope? Let's start with the U.S. Because its debt is not just national, it's global. About half of the $38 trillion is owed to private investors. Roughly 2/3 of those investors are American banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The remaining 1/3, about $9 trillion, is held by foreigners. The largest creditor is Japan, with about $1 trillion, followed by China with roughly $800 billion. So the phrase "America owes China" is true, but only for about 2% of total U.S. debt. Most U.S. debt is owed to America itself. The Treasury issues bonds, banks and funds buy them, and the Fed buys them when needed. Americans pay taxes, and those taxes flow back to American investors as interest. A perfect loop. And this is not unique to America, it is global. Japan lends to the U.S. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe finances developing countries through the World Bank. Developing countries park their reserves in developed nations' bonds, lending back to them in return. A worldwide hot potato game. Except the potato is made of promises. Each country holds someone else's note. Each note is backed by another note. Debts are so intertwined that the system survives on one rule. Nobody leaves the table. And then there is the fourth layer, the financial markets. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, central banks. They are the invisible court that decides nations' destinies. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall, and economies reshape overnight. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. At the top of this structure sit central banks. They don't just manage debt, they create it. Every time they buy bonds, new money is created. A debt on one balance sheet becomes an asset on another. Every dollar in circulation represents a debt somewhere. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every unit carries an invisible IOU. For decades, this system stood on confidence. As long as investors believed governments would pay the interest, even if they never repaid the principal, the machine continued to run. But what happens when that confidence breaks? 2010 Greece crisis. Bonds crashed, yields skyrocketed, and the IMF and European Central Bank intervened under harsh austerity conditions. Argentina. Repeated defaults. Sri Lanka. When foreign reserves ran out, the country couldn't even buy fuel. When the system collapses, creditors become visible. The IMF, ratings agencies, and anonymous bondholders. But even after collapse, the cycle starts again. Old debts are replaced by new ones. The system resets, names change, structure stays. Because in the 21st century, debt is not designed to be repaid. It is designed to be rolled over. Governments never plan to eliminate debt ever. This is not a theory. This is policy. When we take a loan, we must repay the principal. Governments don't. They refinance endlessly, issuing new debt to pay the old. The real product is the interest, the rent of stability. The global economy now depends on this rent. Like a shark, it must keep moving. Stop, and it dies. The U.S. will never repay its $38 trillion. Japan has rolled its debt so long that it now exceeds 250% of GDP. But investors don't expect repayment-only renewal. Why? Because government bonds are the world's most trusted collateral. U.S. Treasuries are seen not as debt, but as assets. Pension funds hold them. Banks use them as collateral. Central banks treat them as money. If governments eliminated their debt entirely, the global financial system would collapse. Liquidity would vanish. Dollar supply would shrink, and deflation would explode. This is why governments don't erase debt, they expand it rhythmically. Debt is the heartbeat of capitalism. So when politicians say we will eliminate the debt, it is an illusion. The goal is not to erase debt, but to keep it sustainable. Because if confidence collapses, the economy stops. Here is the great secret about debt. The plan was never to repay it. The plan was to make the world believe it would be repaid. But confidence is not shared equally. Saying we owe each other is only half true. Interest payments do not flow evenly. They flow upward. Debt is not a transfer between nations, but between classes. This is why global inequality rises alongside global debt. Those who hold debt win. Those who only repay it lose. If this sounds familiar, it's because this is the same story, just scaled up. From households to nations, from nations to the planet. Creditors are not villains. Debtors are not victims. They are two sides of the same engine. Trouble begins when that engine runs out of fuel. When you look for the ultimate creditor, you find no single face. Not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. All of them, and all of us. The modern financial system has turned debt into money itself. Governments issue debt, banks multiply it, Investors trade it, citizens trust it. Debt was once a shackle. Today it is balance. But if that balance breaks, only the true definition of debt remains. A promise that cannot be held forever. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History holds the answers. I'll show you where to look.